and welcome to this special coverage. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. On August the 2nd, U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi landed in China's Taiwan region and met with the leader of the island the next day. Tsai Ing-wen conferred Pelosi with the so-called Order of Propitious Clouds with special grand cordon and said that she's truly grateful to Pelosi for showcasing U.S. Congress's staunch support for Taiwan. Nancy Pelosi has been one of the most vocal China critics in U.S. Congress. As she herself said, her record of criticizing China goes back 30 years. How did the unnecessary and inevitable visit happen? Is Tsai Ing-wen helping or hurting the interests of Taiwan?
In fact, the so-called desinitization means to desinitize the core values and interests which Taiwan depends on to exist.
The desinitization proposed by the Democratic Progressive Party is only used for getting more votes.
The Democratic Progressive Party, or the DPP, the party that Tsai Ing-wen is leading, has a track record of rallying a fraction of Taiwan society for secession and independence through education and indoctrination. Its former leader Chen Shui-bian even bid for a UN membership in 2008 under the name of Taiwan. A plan dead on arrival was rejected by the United Nations. Since coming to power, Tsai Ing-wen has initiated a series of policies aimed at desinitizing Taiwan, meaning making Taiwan less Chinese at every turn. When it comes to desinitization, it is a very interesting concept. Many of our friends in the West are not necessarily familiar with this. Help us understand, how has Tsai Ing-wen and her DPP over the years and perhaps decades really undermined the one China spirit and desinitized the Taiwanese or Taiwan society?
Well, this is a very long playbook. In order to claim the right for self-determination, Taiwan must be an independent and different from mainland China race. So DPP has tried for a long, long time to redefine what Taiwan and Taiwanese is about. The number one tactic is to dilute the importance of China, Chinese culture, Chinese language, and Chinese heritage.
Yeah, Professor Tang, help us understand the damages of this desinitization campaign launched primarily by the DPP over the years.
Yeah, I think the intention of the effort made by Tsai Ing-wen and her party actually gave a very negative impact on the tradition and history and culture between Taiwan and the mainland. So this is actually a bad action taken by the party. And I have been to Taiwan twice, and I'm quite happy that the local people still being there, or Chinese, and they would like to continue the culture, the exchanges with people from mainland, and continue such a tradition of China. DPP and especially Tsai Ing-wen did gave some negative impact on the tradition, on the history of China in this regard. But I don't think she can make it, because the people in mainland or in Taiwan would like to continue such tradition or the culture or the history of the country. This is one China policy. This is the foundation for the one China policy.
Yeah, Joanna, how would you compare Tsai Ing-wen's desinitization campaign and so-called cultural independence campaign, if you compare that against the late leader of Taiwan, Lee Teng-hui, who advocated for so-called one China, one Taiwan, or Chen Shui-bian, who openly bid for a Taiwan membership in the United Nations in 2008. How would you compare Tsai Ing-wen's efforts against her predecessors?
I'm very glad that you mentioned Lee Teng-hui. Lee Teng-hui was the leader under KMT rule, but after he retired, he had self-proclaimed that he has a very strong affiliation with Japan and identified himself as Japanese. So from that roots, you come to see Chen Shui-bian, and now you see Tsai Ing-wen. All of them have a very strong Japanese identification and little Chinese identification. With them being at control, you not only have our textbook or the curricula being changed, you also have a lot of changes in societies. For example, today you will see an entirely in Japanese advertising on local TV, which was never seen and never heard of. You now also have a government plan to remove Chinese from all official tests. So if you want to write for high school or college, or even if you just want to write for being a civil servant, they plan not to have a Chinese language test being included in that. So you can see a very, very strong pro-Japan Taiwan independence movement. It's not just independent from mainland China, it's independent from China and affiliated with Japan. Those are the strong underpinning in Taiwan. If you don't see that, you will miss the really big telltale sign.
Professor Tong, what do you think?
Yeah, I think for decades, at least, after DPP took the power of the island, I'm sure everybody has already realized that this is a political choice, or this is actually a regional choice for DPP to go, independence in this regard. But I don't think they can make it because, according to the resolution by UN Assembly and also by the law, by the constitution of PRC, I think they can only give some, trouble for the region, but I don't think they can make it because we have such a strong intention and such a capability to maintain the integrity of the country.
Now, the DPP's strategy is to exploit the de facto separation with the Chinese mainland due to the Chinese Civil War in the 1940s and to get rid of the Chineseness in social, cultural, and political life of people in Taiwan. The campaign has supporters from the United States. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, or CSIS, is one of the staunchest supporters for Taiwan. And in return, Taiwan is one of its largest donors. According to CSIS website, Tsai Ing-wen administration has donated between $200,000 to just under $500,000 for regional studies. The Responsible Statecraft organization published a report describing Taiwan's funding of American think tanks as omnipresent and rarely disclosed. 5 major Washington think tanks, the Brookings Institution, the Center for American Progress, the Center for a New American Security, and the CSIS and the Hudson Institute all receive funding from the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office. The report says that none of their researchers disclosed the potential conflict of interests between Taiwanese funding and advocating for more security guarantees for and trade with Taiwan. The politicians get callings from Taiwan too. The Taiwan Lobby report published by Center for International Policy found that Taiwan's lobbyists had contacted Nancy Pelosi's office 18 times during the summer of 2019 and tried to arrange a closed-door meeting between Pelosi and Tsai Ing-wen.
民进党从2018年开始
The DPP has been lobbying Nancy Pelosi since 2018 through public relation companies. How much money have they spent? $49,377.
$7
It is difficult to get a person to understand something when his or her salary depends on not understanding it.
She just obeys the orders from the United States. How would she dare to rebel?
The U.S. knows very well that the Taiwan region not being reunited with the mainland is an invaluable asset for them. One analogy is that Taiwan is the watchdog for the U.S. who needs to bring his own food. There's nothing more pathetic than that.
Ever since the beginning of DPP, they have always shown themselves, especially in Washington, as the pro-democracy and pro-progressive value party. Therefore, it is extremely expedient for them to partner with especially the U.S. Democratic Party. Especially the current rhetoric, the narrative, is to find partners in democracy and partners in value. Tsai Ing-wen knows exactly what to say. However, under her control, her administration was doing exactly the opposite. They are neither democratic nor progressive.
How so? How about you explain? Why is that?
In the first term of Tsai Ing-wen, she showed to Taiwan that she is a moderate and she has the ability to maintain status quo across Taiwan Straits. With her background as part of the KMT Security Council member under Li Denghui, she had a lot of buy-in in those narratives. But after her second term, her government has quickly passed legislations against their competitor, their major competitors, KMT, and other political parties. For instance, they passed ill-gotten party asset law to confiscate party assets, including any kinds of party assets from KMT and the so-called KMT affiliates. Therefore, there were a lot of collateral damages. They also passed the so-called Transformation Justice Act that allowed them to rewrite the entire history since 1949. In fact, they can rewrite the history since 1935, when Taiwan returned to the hands of Chinese government. Before that, it was under Japanese rule. The third thing they did was they also confiscated media licenses such as CTI, and they confiscated the assets, a huge number of assets, of a farmland association which was established in Qing Dynasty. All of this shows to the world, at least shows to people in Taiwan, that democracy in their explanation is like a facade in a studio. What Pelosi saw when she came here, she saw that beautiful facade of a democratic avenue like in the studio. But people in Taiwan was experiencing the backbone, the true authoritarian movements made by Tsai Ing-wen's administration in different way, shape, and form. So I would say they are neither democratic nor progressive. It's only a facade of value that the United States welcomed. The United States turned a blind eye to all the sufferings and all the people being oppressed by the current DPP government.
Professor Teng, what do you think? Joanna talked about the fact that this can be a marriage of convenience between the DPP, Tsai Ing-wen, and their supporters in Washington.
DPP would like to manipulate the so-called democracy, freedom, human rights in Taiwan for the party's sake, because this is only a flag for the party to mobilize support from the local people and also get some support from Washington, D.C. So this is actually a game played by the party, especially by Tsai Ing-wen.
I mean, did Tsai Ing-wen play this card well? What's in it for Tsai Ing-wen when it comes to the visit of Nancy Pelosi, which she herself has been very much involved in welcoming?
Yeah, this is actually symbolic visit by the Speaker of the United States at this moment, because the two sides, I mean Tsai Ing-wen and Nancy Pelosi, would like to use such a chance to get more support or get more attention from the public as a so-called democratic system or democratic leader in this region or in the United States. So I think this is not a real democracy for the local people in Taiwan and also for the Americans this time.
Well, Joanna, you alluded to the fact that this could be a gain for Tsai Ing-wen politically, but a loss for the people of Taiwan. Why is that?
There are three perspectives. From the political maneuver perspective, Tsai Ing-wen does seem to be gaining a lot in terms of notoriety as well as wide support from the so-called Western partners. However, people in Taiwan, especially those who are opposed to her policy or her administrative measures, have now been sacrificed. So the three perspectives are very, very different. Let's talk about people who were being oppressed by the DPP government. Those people have in the past hoped that international community would see the true suffering of the people and have tried to wage all kinds of campaigns so that people can see what's really happening. With Nancy Pelosi coming to Taiwan, touting the achievement of the DPP government, it's stepping on all the hopes and dreams of the people who are still fighting those injustice measures. In addition to that, the current change of the status quo, I put in quote, because Tsai Ing-wen promised everybody that she would maintain status quo, and we have continued to tell her that
she's undermining
status quo
it bit by bit.
is dynamic. And you have to define what status quo was. And we also always said to her, status quo for most people is peace and stability across Taiwan Straits. Now, anyone who is against changing of status quo in Taiwan now is being pushed to the sideline or being mobilized and said, look, mainland China has done all these military exercises against us. They are the big bad wolf. You have to come behind the government. You have to mobilize. So you see this language and narrative on all front pages. So also, those who have hoped for justice are now being sold, and those who have hoped for peace are now being mobilized and oppressed in Taiwan.
Now, America's strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan is a strategy of double-dealing and hypocrisy. It uses the island as the unsinkable aircraft carrier to contain China, a strategy Washington has been using since the beginning of the Cold War. And Washington found a partner in DPP. Since Tsai Ing-wen was elected leader of the region, she has made 25 different arms deals with 2 successive U.S. administrations. Close to $20 billion were spent on buying U.S. weapons.
She has already handpicked her heir apparent, the successor. At the same time, their grand campaign motto may continue going on without any intervention. The campaign motto is to fight China and protect Taiwan. However, between the two, there is a critical link, that is to fight China, and you will have US and Japan support so that we can protect Taiwan. If the middle part is not seen or not substantiated, then the entire campaign will fall apart. So I see the recent military exercises and the action or non-action by US and Japan as very critical turning point. It is important to have more people thinking about, whether that to fight China and protect Taiwan can really be delivered by Tsai Ing-wen and DPP if without US and Japan support. And if there is US and Japan support, what will be the force and the anti-force? What will be the measure and countermeasures? Will Taiwan be hurt in the process? So all these new discussions will come into the public debate, and probably, if not changing this year-end election, it will change the 2024 election.
I mean, Professor Tang, what do you think are the odds of Tsai Ing-wen's heir apparent in 2024 to keep the leadership, to retain the leadership of the island going forward?
Yeah, I'm sure Tsai Ing-wen and her followers would like to continue the power in the island. So she would like to manipulate the situation, especially situation in Asia-Pacific region. For example, the United States has initiated the so-called strategic competition with China. And at this moment, the U.S. side would like to make full use of Taiwan issue to compete with China, and Tsai Ing-wen and her party would like to try their best to manipulate such a competition and to get the United States and some other countries in this region be deeply involved in the issue. So this is a very complicated situation, and I'm sure Tsai Ing-wen can or would continue such manipulation of the international situation and continue the relationship between Taiwan and the United States, and for the sake of DPP and herself, and to continue the power in the island.
In March this year, Tsai Ing-wen said that Taiwan's military is planning to cooperate with the U.S. National Guard. As it pours money into the United States, many residents in Taiwan are struggling to make ends meet.
The officials are living in the royal palace and know nothing about people's woes. That's what I want to tell Tsai. Let her think about it.
That will do it for this special program. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing.